Have you ever given everything to your family only to be told you're an embarrassment? That's what happened to me. I'm George Miller, 61 years old, and for the last 23 years, I've been the janitor at Lincoln Elementary. I fix leaky faucets, mop up cafeteria spills, and clear snow at 5 in the morning before the kids arrive. But none of that mattered on the night my daughter-in-law, Olivia Carter, decided to humiliate me in front of 180 guests right after I handed her an $85,000 check for her dream wedding. She looked me dead in the eyes, smiled sweetly for the crowd, and then whispered the 4 words that cut deeper than any insult I'd ever heard: "Stay in your lane." At that moment, to her, I was nothing more than the pathetic janitor who had somehow scraped together his life savings. She didn't see a father giving from his heart. She didn't see a man honoring the memory of his late wife. She saw a working-class old man who should sit quietly in the corner, grateful just to be invited. That was her mistake. Because what Olivia didn't know was that the man she called a charity case was quietly sitting on a multi-million-dollar empire. Now, before you roll your eyes, let me make one thing clear. This isn't one of those rags to riches fantasies. This is a story about family drama, about betrayal wrapped in fake smiles, about the kind of humiliation that eats at your soul until you either break or fight back. And when you fight back with silence, with patience, with calculation, that's when you unlock the kind of pro-revenge no one ever sees coming. So what really happened that night, imagine being surrounded by applause, people patting your back, telling you how noble you are for spending your last dime on your son's happiness. Imagine seeing pity in the eyes of your friends, your church community, even your boss. Everyone convinced you're broke, that you've sacrificed everything, when the truth is, you've been building something they could never imagine. This isn't just a wedding story. This is a story of hidden while silent power and an unexpected twist that turned a janitor into the most talked about man in town. I'll tell you exactly how Olivia's words set the stage for her downfall. I'll tell you how a single phone call during the wedding reception changed the way 180 people saw me. But first, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever been dismissed because of your job, your clothes, your old truck? Drop a comment below, because I promise by the end of this story, you'll never look at assumptions the same way again. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is assume someone's value based on what you see. And sometimes the man mopping floors is also the man who owns the building. They say betrayal doesn't always come with knives or shouting matches. Sometimes it comes with a laugh, a pat on the shoulder, and a smile wide enough to fool everyone in the room. That's exactly how Olivia Carter played her game. From the moment she slipped that $85,000 cashier's check out of my hand, she made it her mission to turn me into a walking charity case, the poor janitor who had supposedly emptied his piggy bank for the privilege of being part of her wedding. The first time I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding was at the bridal boutique. Olivia insisted I come along. She wanted both fathers there, she said, as if she was honoring me. But when the boutique owner asked what I did for a living, Olivia didn't hesitate. He's the janitor at Lincoln Elementary. Been there forever, very dedicated to his mop and bucket. Then she laughed like it was the punchline of a joke. The room chuckled politely. I smiled because that's what you do when you're cornered. But inside I could feel something tighten. It wasn't embarrassment for being a janitor. It was the sting of being turned into a caricature, a prop in her performance. It didn't stop there. At the cake tasting, the baker asked about the budget, and Olivia clapped me on the back as if I were some old dog doing tricks. Well, George here managed to scrape together enough for a decent cake. We're grateful he could make it work. Michael, my son, stood there shifting on his feet, saying nothing. That silence was worse than Olivia's words. My own boy, too timid or too blinded to defend me. In that moment, I realized family drama isn't just about conflict. It's about the silence of those who should have spoken up. Then came the posts. Oh, the posts. Olivia plastered Instagram and Facebook with pictures of the venue, the flowers, the Tiffany ring Michael could barely afford on a teacher's salary. Her captions dripped with gratitude, but not the real kind. When your father-in-law empties his savings so you can have your dream wedding, just ungrateful, just your family, shush blessed. She knew exactly what she was doing. Those hashtags were daggers dressed as compliments. The comments poured in. So sweet of him. Janitors don't make much. He must really love you. And Olivia hearted every single one. She wasn't just enjoying the attention, she was curating a narrative, a public story where I played the starring role of the noble poor man. At church, people started approaching me with pity in their eyes. "George, what you've done is inspiring," one woman whispered. At the hardware store, the owner started giving me discounts. "You've got enough expenses with that wedding," he winked. My barber stopped taking tips. Even Principal Howard Clark, a man who'd seen me work side by side with him for 2 decades, pulled me aside after a meeting. $85,000 is a lot of money for a maintenance supervisor. I hope you're not putting yourself in a difficult position. He meant well, but it landed like a shovel to the chest. I wasn't becoming respected for my sacrifice. I was becoming pitied for my supposed poverty. Olivia wasn't done. At the rehearsal walkthrough, the coordinator complimented me for funding the wedding. Olivia chimed in before I could respond. "Oh, George has been saving his pennies for years. Haven't you?" George. She made it sound like I'd been hoarding nickels in coffee cans since the Clinton administration. Rebecca Collins, her maid of honor, and lawyer friend jumped in with her research. "Did you know the median salary for a janitor in Ohio is around $45,000 a year? For George to have saved $85,000, he must have been budgeting for nearly 20 years. The room applauded. People were misty-eyed. And me, I sat there like a prop in her Broadway performance. They were cheering for a version of me that didn't exist. The betrayal wasn't just in Olivia's words, it was in Michael's silence, the complicity of everyone who believed her, and the sheer gall of strangers acting like I was some tragic hero for doing what any father would do. That's the cruelest form of betrayal, when the people closest to you twist your dignity into a spectacle. And what stung the most was that Olivia didn't frame this as gratitude. She framed it as superiority. Every story, every post, every introduction was a reminder that in her eyes I was a man who should be grateful for being tolerated. "Stay in your lane," she told me once, smirking. Those words weren't just an insult, they were a sentence. In her world, my lane was the mop bucket, the rusty pickup, the humble house. Not the mahogany halls, not the crystal chandeliers, not the 5-star honeymoon she bragged about. But here's what Olivia didn't know. Silent power is dangerous. Every time she laughed, every time she patted my shoulder like I was some pitiful mutt, every time she hearted a comment calling me broke, she was digging her own grave. Because hidden wealth has a way of rewriting family drama in the most unexpected twist. And while Olivia thought she was scripting my humiliation, I was quietly preparing the climax of a story she wouldn't see coming. Rehearsal dinners are supposed to be warm, lighthearted nights where two families come together, share stories, laugh over embarrassing childhood memories, and toast to the future. But the night before my son Michael's wedding, I didn't feel warmth. I felt like I was sitting on trial, the room buzzing with praise that sounded more like pity, the spotlight fixed on me, as if I were the tragic hero in a play I never auditioned for. It started innocently enough. Olivia's father gave a speech about watching his daughter grow into a woman, his voice proud and shaky, exactly what you'd expect from a dad about to walk his little girl down the aisle. Michael's best man followed cracking jokes about college days, stories about late-night study sessions, and his awful taste in pizza. People laughed, clapped, and the evening felt normal. Until Olivia stood up. "I want to say something about family," she began, her voice sweet and her eyes glistening with rehearsed emotion. She looked around the room, then rested her hand on my shoulder. None of this would have been possible without George. He funded our dream wedding out of his own pocket. Polite applause rippled through the room. I nodded slightly, wishing she'd stop there. But she didn't. She never did. "What makes this so special," Olivia continued, "is knowing the sacrifice this represents. George works as a janitor at Lincoln Elementary. He's been there for 23 years, mopping floors and fixing leaks. And instead of saving for himself, instead of buying a new truck or planning for retirement, he gave it all away for his son's happiness." Her voice cracked, perfectly timed, and the room erupted. People clapped louder, some even stood. I felt the energy shift, not admiration, not respect, but pity. They were clapping for a poor man who'd supposedly emptied his life savings. Then Rebecca Collins, her maid of honor, stood. "I work in family law," she said, smiling, as if about to drop a truth bomb. And I couldn't help but run some numbers. The median salary for a janitor in Ohio is about $45,000 a year. After taxes, housing, and living expenses, saving $85,000, would take at least 15, maybe 20 years of strict budgeting. That means George started saving when Michael was still in elementary school, setting aside money for a wedding he didn't even know would happen yet. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what unconditional love looks like. The room went silent, people hanging on every word. Then the standing ovation came, chairs, scraping hands, clapping eyes wet with tears. I sat there frozen. They were applauding a fairy tale version of me, a noble poor man scraping pennies together, when the truth was I could have written that check 10 times over without blinking. I scanned the room. Principal Howard Clark gave me a thumbs up from across the table. Olivia's mother dabbed her eyes, whispering to her husband. Even Michael looked moved, tears glistening as he raised his glass toward me. And that was the knife twist. My own son believed the lie. He believed I had sacrificed everything, that I was the kind of father who had nothing left for himself because he'd given it all away. Then came the offers of help. Olivia's mother stood and smiled warmly. George, I know this might be presumptuous, but a man who gives this much deserves some support too. My husband still has connections in the automotive industry. We'd be happy to help you get a more reliable truck. Something safe and dependable. The words were kind on the surface, but they cut deep. They weren't offering kindness, they were offering charity. And I didn't need charity. I needed respect. That night, as applause thundered and people patted me on the back, I felt like I was being buried alive under layers of false admiration. Every compliment was a stone. Every sympathetic smile was a shovel of dirt. And Olivia stood there glowing in her performance, the benevolent daughter-in-law painting me as the poor janitor with the oversized heart. This wasn't gratitude. This was betrayal disguised as affection. This was family drama weaponized into a public spectacle. They turned my contribution into a pity story, my dignity into a prop for their emotional theater. And the cruelest part, they meant well. They thought they were honoring me. But honor without truth is nothing but humiliation wrapped in applause. I forced a smile, raised my glass, and nodded as if I were touched. Inside, though, something burned. Silent power, hidden wealth. The knowledge that while they thought they were praising a man scraping by, I was sitting on 15 properties worth over $3 million and a resort Olivia herself had booked for her honeymoon. They were clapping for the poor man I wasn't, while the real me was quietly planning the pro-revenge that would turn their pity into shock. When the ovation finally ended, I excused myself and stepped out onto the terrace, the cool night air hitting my face like a wake-up call. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the names of people who actually knew who I was. Linda Roberts, my property manager, and Eleanor Davis, my late wife's sister, who'd seen every step of my journey. I knew then that the next day wasn't just about Michael and Olivia's vows. It was about reclaiming my dignity. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't just correct the record, it would shatter the false narrative Olivia had built. That night after the rehearsal dinner, I couldn't sleep. The applause still rang in my ears, echoing like hammers pounding nails into a coffin. Every clap was a reminder that the room saw me as a man who had given everything, who had nothing left, who should be admired for his noble poverty. I lay in the dark of my old ranch house, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly, and thought of Margaret. Margaret had been gone 4 years, taken by cancer in what felt like the blink of an eye. We were married 32 years. She knew me better than anyone. She used to laugh when people underestimated me. Let them, she'd say. It just means they won't see you coming. She had a way of turning pain into perspective, of reminding me that worth wasn't measured by what others thought, but by what you quietly built when no one was watching. Margaret would never have let Olivia talk to me that way. Margaret would never have let me sit in silence, smiling, while people patted me on the back for sacrifices I never made. I walked into our bedroom, still frozen in time. Her clothes hung neatly in the closet, the cedar scent of her sweater faint but still there. On the dresser sat her jewelry box, a simple oak case she loved more than the expensive necklace I once splurged on. I ran my hand across it, remembering the way she'd roll her eyes whenever I brought home something shiny. I don't need diamonds, she'd say. I need you to keep building. For us. For Michael. She always believed in the future we were creating, even when money was tight, even when all I had was a mop in my hand and calluses on my palms. That's what burned the most. Olivia hadn't just insulted me, she had insulted Margaret's memory. She had mocked the very foundation we had built 32 years of work, saving, investing, learning, failing, trying again. And she did it with a smile, wrapping humiliation in ribbons of gratitude. That wasn't just betrayal, that was desecration. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the framed photo of Margaret in her garden sun hat, tilted dirt on her hands, grinning like she'd just discovered treasure. She loved roses. She said they reminded her of people fragile on the outside, thorny at times, but capable of blooming into something breathtaking. But you have to tend to them, she'd say. Neglect them, and they wither. Mock them, and they harden. And in that moment, I realized Olivia had treated me like a weed, something to laugh at, to dismiss. But Margaret knew the truth. I was a rose with thorns. The humiliation I'd endured wasn't new. Growing up, I'd heard the same sneers. My father was a mechanic. My mother cleaned houses. People looked down on us, and I swore I'd never let that define me. That's why I started buying properties in the first place. A duplex here, a small rental there. It was never about showing off. It was about freedom. The freedom Margaret and I dreamed of. The freedom to choose generosity without sacrifice. The freedom to help Michael without being pitied. And here I was stripped of that freedom, trapped in Olivia's story, cast as the poor janitor who gave it all away. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the truck parked in the driveway. Old, beat up, but reliable. To Olivia, that truck was proof I was broke. To me, it was proof I didn't need to flaunt wealth to own it. That's when the decision crystallized. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to argue. My silence, the same silence they mistook for weakness, was about to become my weapon. Silent power is the deadliest kind of revenge, because it builds pressure until the reveal, and when it comes, it hits like thunder. I promised myself right there, staring out into the night, I would not let Margaret's legacy be reduced to pity applause. I would not let my son continue believing I had sacrificed everything like some charity case. And I would not let Olivia walk down the aisle tomorrow thinking she had me pegged. Tomorrow she would learn what lane I truly belonged in. I walked back to the dresser and pulled out the folder I kept locked away. Property deeds, rental agreements, tax returns, balance sheets. 25 years of work neatly organized the real story of who I was. Not a janitor who scraped pennies, a property investor who built an empire brick by brick, quietly, patiently. This wasn't about proving them wrong. This was about reclaiming my dignity, honoring Margaret, and teaching Olivia a lesson she would never forget. As I slid the folder back into the drawer, I whispered into the quiet room, "I'll stay silent until it matters. And when I speak, the truth will roar louder than her applause." Margaret's picture seemed to smile at me from the nightstand. For the first time in months, I felt calm, because tomorrow wasn't just a wedding, it was the stage for justice. The night after I whispered my promise to Margaret's picture, I woke before dawn with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The humiliation, the pity, the fake admiration, it all needed to be dismantled, not with shouting, but with precision. If Olivia wanted me to stay in my lane, then I would show her exactly which lane I belonged in. And I'd do it with silent power. I brewed a pot of coffee, sat at the kitchen table with my flip phone, and started making calls. The first was to Linda Roberts, my property manager. She'd been with me for almost 15 years, overseeing leases, repairs, and tenant relations across the 15 properties I'd accumulated. Linda was sharp, professional, and loyal, the kind of person who knew how to present numbers with authority. "Linda," I said when she picked up, "I need a portfolio summary. Full breakdown, property values, rental income, net worth. Everything. And it needs to look official, the kind of thing a lawyer or banker couldn't poke holes in." She didn't ask why not right away. She just paused, then said, "George, this about Olivia." I smiled even though she couldn't see me. "It's about the truth. And I'm going to need you on standby tomorrow in case I put you on speaker." She chuckled, a knowing sound. "Someone's been underestimating you again. Don't worry, I'll have the files prepped by morning. And George, when you decide to drop this bomb, make sure I'm listening. I wouldn't miss it for the world." The second call was harder, more personal. I dialed Eleanor Davis, Margaret's sister. Eleanor had been at our wedding 32 years ago. She'd watched Michael grow up, and she'd been by my side when cancer stole Margaret. She also happened to be a retired bank executive. Her word carried weight in this town. "Eleanor," I said, "I need you at the wedding tomorrow. Not just as family, but as a witness. Olivia's been painting a picture of me that isn't true, and when I set the record straight, I'll need someone respected to confirm what they're hearing." Her voice sharpened. "What exactly has she been saying?" I told her. "About the boutique, the cake tasting, the Instagram posts. About the standing ovation at the rehearsal dinner, the lawyer maid of honor crunching numbers to prove my imaginary poverty. About Olivia's smile as she positioned me as the poor janitor who'd emptied his savings." By the time I finished, Eleanor was quiet. Then she said Margaret would have shut that down in an instant. "You've been too patient, George. It's time." "That's what I thought too," I said. "Tomorrow I won't be silent anymore. But I need you sitting close so when I reveal the truth, people don't think I'm spinning fairy tales." "You'll have me," she promised. The final step was the linchpin, Azure Bay Resort. 3 years ago, I'd bought the struggling property for $2.8 million in cash and spent another $400,000 renovating it into one of Ohio's most exclusive destinations. 47 rooms, a full spa, conference facilities, riverfront views. It was my pride, not because it was flashy, but because it represented 20 years of grinding, finally blossoming into something undeniable. Olivia had no idea. She'd bragged for months about their honeymoon at Azure Bay, talking about how she'd charm her way into upgrades, how she deserved the best suite. The irony was delicious. She was about to vacation in a resort owned by the man she mocked. That evening, I called the front desk. "This is George Miller. I need to speak with the manager about the Carter honeymoon reservation." The clerk didn't hesitate. "Of course, Mr. Miller. We'll have everything flagged and ready. Would you like us to verify ownership if it comes up?" "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow there may be questions about who approves premium accommodations. Make sure the manager is ready to confirm the truth." I hung up feeling the plan lock into place. Linda with the financial portfolio, Eleanor with her credibility, Azure Bay with its undeniable reality. 3 pillars of truth that would collapse Olivia's entire performance. But this wasn't just about revenge. As I sat in the dim kitchen, staring at the old linoleum Margaret once swore we'd replace but never did, I realized it was about respect, about justice, about teaching my son that silence isn't weakness, that wealth isn't always loud, that dignity isn't for sale. The next day, Olivia would stand in front of 180 guests and tell her story again about the poor janitor with the oversized heart. And that's when I would step forward, not to humiliate her, not to scream, but to correct the record with facts no one could deny. Family drama is only powerful when one side holds the stage. Tomorrow I'd take the stage back, and when the truth hit, it would hit harder than any toast, louder than any applause, and sharper than any insult she'd ever thrown my way. The wedding itself was beautiful. The sun cut through the stained glass of Riverside Manor's chapel, music swelled, and for a brief moment I let myself forget what was waiting. Michael looked sharp in his tux, Olivia radiant in her gown. But I knew what was coming. I knew the script she'd been perfecting for months, the performances she couldn't resist. By the time the reception began, the mahogany-paneled hall was buzzing with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of roast beef and champagne. I was seated at the family table with Eleanor beside me, her presence steady like Margaret's hand reaching through time. Linda was on standby phone in her pocket, waiting for my signal. The first hour rolled smoothly, drinks, appetizers, small talk. Then Olivia rose from the head table, microphone in hand, glowing like she'd just stepped onto a Broadway stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "none of this would be possible without one man, Michael's father, George Miller." She gestured toward me, and the applause started again, polite at first. "George has worked as a janitor at Lincoln Elementary for 23 years. Through discipline, sacrifice, and love, he managed to save $85,000, his entire nest egg, to make tonight possible." The clapping grew louder. Some people even stood. Tears glistened on cheeks. Olivia wasn't finished. "George represents everything good about family drama: hard work, humility, selflessness. He gave up his retirement, his comfort, everything, so his son could have a dream wedding. Let's raise our glasses to the man who proves that even the humblest life can hold the biggest heart." The ovation was thunderous, a tidal wave of pity disguised as praise. I sat frozen, watching 180 people applaud a version of me that didn't exist. And then Olivia delivered the line that triggered the reveal. She smiled, holding her glass high. "Tomorrow, Michael and I leave for our honeymoon at Azure Bay Resort, one of the most exclusive destinations in Ohio. 5 nights in their premium suite. I'm sure we'll charm our way into some upgrades. That was my cue. I stood slowly, the room going quiet as people turned to see why I was interrupting. I pulled my phone from my pocket and said, "Olivia, you might want to call the resort before you pack. There may be some issues with your reservation." A murmur rippled through the hall. Olivia's confident smile faltered. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to laugh it off. I scrolled to Linda's number, put the phone on a speaker, and held it up. She answered on the second ring. "Linda Roberts, Property Management." "Linda," I said loudly enough for the room to hear, "could you tell everyone here exactly what you prepared for me this week?" Her voice came through crisp and professional. "Certainly, Mr. Miller. As requested, I compiled your financial summary. You currently own 15 properties across 3 counties with a total valuation of about $3.2 million. Monthly rental income averages $28,000, netting you around $20,000 after expenses. Net worth after liabilities stands at approximately $2.1 million. The room fell dead silent. Forks clattered against plates. I could feel 100 pairs of eyes drilling into me. Olivia's glass trembled in her hand. "And Linda," I continued, "what about Azure Bay Resort?" she said. "That's the 47-room property you purchased outright 3 years ago for $2.8 million. After renovations, it now generates nearly $500,000 in seasonal profit." "You are, of course, the sole owner." Olivia's face drained of color. You own Azure Bay," she stammered. "I do," I said simply. "And tomorrow when you check in, it won't be upgrades you'll be charming your way into. It'll be my staff asking me personally how to handle your stay." A shocked murmur swept across the crowd. That's when Eleanor stood. She cleared her throat, her voice calm, but commanding the authority of a retired banker echoing across the hall. "I can confirm everything Linda just said. George has been building this portfolio for 25 years. Margaret knew. I knew. He never flaunted it, never bragged. He chose to live modestly. But don't mistake modesty for poverty." The room erupted again, but this time it wasn't applause. It was disbelief, whispers, gasps. People leaned across the tables, jaws dropping. The same guests who cheered for my sacrifice were now realizing they'd been applauding a lie. Olivia tried to laugh, her voice cracking. "But your house, your truck, your clothes." I met her eyes. "They are exactly what I want them to be. I live modestly because I choose to, not because I have to. The mistake wasn't in your assumptions. It was in your arrogance." A hush fell again. Even Michael sat stunned, torn between pride and shock. I turned back to the crowd. "You all applauded my sacrifice last night. You clapped for the poor janitor who gave everything away. But that story was never true. The truth is, this generosity doesn't require poverty, and silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy. Sometimes it's the sharpest blade you can wield." For a beat, the hall was utterly still. Then came the whispers. "He owns the resort, $3 million in property. All those years and he never said a word." The truth had finally roared louder than their applause. And Olivia, the woman who told me to stay in my lane, now stood exposed, realizing she'd been playing in a lane she never even saw coming. The moment Linda's voice faded and Eleanor confirmed my portfolio, the entire reception hall seemed to shift. Conversations turned into stunned whispers. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Guests who had been clapping minutes earlier now sat slack-jawed, eyes darting between me and Olivia. The same people who had pitied me now looked at me with awe, and the same people who applauded my sacrifice were now realizing they had been applauding a lie Olivia built. Olivia's parents looked like they wanted the floor to swallow them whole. Her father's face flushed red as he stared into his wine glass, while her mother tried to offer a trembling smile that fooled no one. They had been so eager to treat me like a charity case, even offering to help me buy a safer truck, and now they were the ones sitting in the glow of humiliation. I almost felt sorry for them, but then I remembered the months of whispered comments, the condescending pats on the shoulder, the way Olivia paraded my poverty for likes and hashtags. Sympathy wasn't on the menu tonight. Michael sat frozen, his expression torn between shock and guilt. He had been silent for too long, letting Olivia spin the narrative unchecked. Now, with the truth spilling across the room, I could see the weight of realization sinking into him. He wasn't just blindsided by my wealth. He was blindsided by the fact that he had let his wife's disrespect go unchallenged for months. That pain wasn't mine to carry, it was his. Guests began to shuffle, whispering lines that carried easily in the quiet. He owns Azure Bay, $3 million in property. All those years, and he never said a word. A teacher from Michael's school leaned across to another guest and muttered, "The janitor's been sitting on an empire." Every comment was another nail in the coffin of Olivia's carefully crafted story. Olivia tried to salvage the moment. She laughed weakly, voice trembling. "It doesn't change the fact that you're a janitor." The room recoiled at her words. Even her own maid of honor, Rebecca, shook her head in disbelief. That was when I stood taller, my voice steady, carrying across the hushed room. Being a janitor is honest work. Fixing broken things, keeping a school running, making sure kids are safe, that's dignity. But make no mistake, my worth was never tied to a paycheck, and neither is anyone else's. Your mistake was believing money makes the man. The truth is character makes the man. Always has, always will. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was electric. People leaned in listening, as if I had just cracked open a truth they'd all forgotten. Don't measure people by their job titles or the clothes they wear. Measure them by their integrity, by how they treat others when no one's watching. Measure them by the way they rise after being underestimated. Olivia's face crumpled. She had been stripped of her narrative, left standing in a silk gown, but naked of power. Her parents avoided my eyes. Her friends whispered behind manicured hands. Michael finally put a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Dad, I'm sorry. I should have stopped this sooner." I didn't answer him then. Tonight wasn't about apologies, it was about truth. Guess who had once offered me discounts and pity now came forward with shaky smiles. Dr. Clark, the principal, muttered, "George, I had no idea. All these years, I cut him off gently. All these years, I was the same man you knew. I fixed pipes, I swept floors, and I also built something bigger. But my dignity didn't come from property deeds. It came from knowing who I was, even when others mocked me." That line seemed to ripple across the hall. People nodded, some even clapped softly. It wasn't the pity applause from before. It was respect, real respect. Olivia slipped away to a corner, her bridesmaids circling like nervous birds. But the damage was done. She had spent months trying to turn me into a prop for her image of sacrifice, and now she was the one exposed. That's the thing about betrayal. When the truth comes out, it doesn't just sting, it scars. As the evening carried on, the energy of the room shifted permanently. Guests wanted to ask me about investments, about real estate, about how I kept it quiet for so long. I answered politely, but I made one thing clear. I didn't build this to impress anyone. I built it to protect my family, and no amount of disrespect will ever change that. By the end of the night, the false pity that had followed me for months had evaporated. In its place was something stronger, respect built not on wealth, but on the reminder that worth is measured in character, not in salary. Justice had finally arrived, not with shouting, but with the quiet roar of truth. 3 weeks after the wedding, the phone rang. It was Michael. His voice carried the weight of a man walking on eggshells. "Dad, Olivia and I would like to take you to dinner. Just the three of us." Part of me wanted to decline, to let the silence do the talking. But Margaret's voice echoed in my head. Everyone deserves the chance to learn from their mistakes. So I agreed. We met at a small Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place Margaret loved, with red checkered tablecloths and candles flickering in wine bottles. I arrived first, ordered a coffee, and prepared myself for whatever apology Olivia had scripted. When they walked in, I noticed immediately she looked different. No designer handbag, no extravagant jewelry, no phone flashing in her hand like a trophy. She looked subdued. For a few minutes, the conversation circled around safe topics: Michael's classes, the honeymoon, the food at the resort. Then Olivia cleared her throat, her eyes not meeting mine. Finally, she looked up. "George, I owe you an apology. Not the quick kind I gave you at the wedding, but the real kind. I spent our honeymoon thinking about everything that happened. And I realized I didn't just disrespect you, I disrespected myself, my husband, even Margaret's memory." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. She fumbled with her napkin, voice trembling. I treated you like a prop, a story I could use to make myself look grateful. I called you poor, embarrassed you in front of strangers, and painted you as someone you're not. I was arrogant and shallow. And I'm ashamed. Her words hung in the air like heavy smoke. Michael squeezed her hand, urging her on. Olivia took a deep breath. But I also realized something else. I've been so focused on spending on appearances, on keeping up with a lifestyle that doesn't even exist anymore, that I forgot what real building looks like. You built an empire from nothing, not to flaunt it, but to protect your family. And instead of respecting that, I mocked it. I want to change that. I want to learn. Those last three words struck me harder than any insult she'd ever thrown. I want to learn. For months, Olivia had dismissed me as the janitor, the man with the mop. Now she was asking me to teach her. It wasn't money she wanted anymore. It was knowledge. And knowledge, unlike wealth, can't be faked. I leaned back, studying her. Why should I believe you? I asked. Because apologies are easy. Changing is hard. She met my eyes steady for the first time. Because I'm tired of being a consumer. I want to be a builder. I want Michael and me to create something instead of just spending what we don't have. I don't want to end up bitter, clinging to appearances while everything collapses underneath. I want to build like you did, quietly, with purpose. For the first time, I saw sincerity, not performance, not manipulation, just truth. I nodded slowly. If you're serious, it won't be glamorous. It won't be about fancy houses or quick wins. It'll be about patience, discipline, and understanding that wealth is just the byproduct of choices, not the goal. Can you handle that? She nodded. Yes. Teach me. Over the following months, Olivia surprised me. She devoured every book I recommended on real estate investing, even basic budgeting. She tagged along when I visited duplexes, asked questions about tenant screening, property taxes, maintenance costs. She showed me spreadsheets she built late at night, trying to understand cash flow. And for the first time, she stopped posting for validation. There were no Instagram captions about sacrifices, no hashtags painting me as a martyr. Just quiet work. Michael was proud. I could see it in his eyes. His wife was finally learning the difference between image and integrity. And he was proud of me too for opening the door, for giving Olivia the chance to transform instead of writing her off completely. This was the real pro-revenge. Not just exposing her arrogance in front of 180 guests, but guiding her into becoming someone better. Silent power isn't just about winning, it's about teaching. Justice isn't revenge for the sake of pain. Justice is making sure the lesson sticks. By winter, Olivia was different. She still had her flaws, who doesn't? But she was no longer the woman who patted me on the back like a dog or hashtagged my supposed poverty. She was sitting beside me, notebook in hand, learning how to analyze a rental deal, asking me what I saw in a neighborhood, how I spotted opportunities others missed. And each time I thought of Margaret. She would have smiled at this scene, at the unlikely possibility that even betrayal can lead to growth. When Olivia thanked me after another long afternoon of touring properties, I told her the truth. You don't owe me gratitude. You owe yourself discipline. You don't build wealth to prove people wrong. You build it to prove yourself right. She nodded, eyes shining, and for once I believed her. As I look back on everything that happened, from the humiliation at the boutique, to the pity applause at the rehearsal dinner, to the truth finally roaring louder than Olivia's performance, I've learned something I want you to carry with you. Generosity does not require poverty. You don't have to empty your pockets or play the role of a martyr to prove your love. True generosity comes from strength, from choice, from the ability to give without losing yourself in the process. And here's another truth that night carved into me: assumptions are not facts. People will look at your clothes, your car, your job title, and they'll think they know your story. They'll decide what lane you belong in, just like Olivia told me. But those judgments, they're nothing but smoke. The only thing that defines you is your character, your discipline, and the choices you make when no one's watching. Finally, I learned to embrace what I call silent power. For months, I let the whispers roll over me, I let the pity pile up, and I let the narrative run its course. But silence is not always weakness. Sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon you can wield, because it makes the reveal unstoppable. And when the truth comes, it doesn't just correct the record, it rewrites it. So if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been labeled by your paycheck, dismissed by your appearance, or shoved into a lane that doesn't belong to you, let this story remind you you don't owe anyone proof of your worth. But when the time comes, let your truth speak so loudly it drowns out every false story told about you. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated the way I was? Have you ever had to prove that you were more than what people assumed? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this family drama hit you the way it hit me, don't just scroll past. Save this video, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe right now so you don't miss the next story. Because sometimes the quietest people hold the loudest surprises, and the next surprise might just change everything.